Hi, everybody, and welcome back. We are going to be focusing on Chapter 7, which is promoting growth and development. So we have two primary goals, right? You want to develop yourself as an officer and you want to develop your subordinates. We have to look at the workplace culture in order to do that. And the workplace culture is going to be defined as the beliefs and the values that are shared by everybody in a work organization, which are both formal and informal, okay? And it communicates the expectations of the organization overall. So let's talk about police culture a little bit. So typically what we see is early in an officer's career, people come in and they're very idealistic. They want to help. They want to make a difference. And by the time they're at the end of their career, we see a huge shift, right? We see that idealism is kind of gone. Those high expectations are waning because you've had a full career. So want to understand how people come into the culture and where people are at different parts of their careers. There's a strong familial culture to law enforcement that you're all a part of a team. You all depend on each other for safety, in some situations, survival. And this creates an intense loyalty, which results in unconditional backup. And unconditional backup is that unspoken rule that all officers must take action to back each other up physically, emotionally, psychologically, and ethically. That which is expressed as the department norms will become the overall attitudes and beliefs of the individuals in the group. People behave relative to norms with obedience. Nobody likes being the person who rocks the boat. Nobody wants to stand out like the sore thumb. So people tend to just adhere to the overall norms. But when somebody does behave outside of the norms, there's frequently, and this is true of most places, but it's very true in criminal justice organizations, that when you behave outside of the norm, there tends to be informal social pushback, right? There's no formal sanction necessarily levied up front, but people will start giving you negative social feedback and pressuring you to stop breaking those norms. There are two common norms in policing, and those are loyalty and the code of silence. Loyalty to one another and loyalty to the organization is a must, and it's a good thing. But the code of silence can be an organizational destroyer. And that code of silence is when officers are unwilling to follow to just divulge the misconduct of a fellow colleague. This can become a cultural problem within police because of that loyalty. That when you've got someone who is breaking the law, who's engaging in corruption, who's misbehaving, and doing things that, A, are illegal, B, not the mission of the organization, and C, represents poorly to the community, because that norm of loyalty is so central to law enforcement. Nobody wants to be the person that says, yeah, I saw officer so-and-so do blankety blank, right? You don't want to be the person that breaks ranks. So people don't. And if there is a culture of law enforcement that is full of corruption, you don't have people willing to step up and say, yeah, okay, this is what's going on. And that corruption just sort of begins to snowball. So the code of silence can be a really big problem. A very good example of this is the NYPD of the 1970s, which was rife with corruption in a myriad of capacities. If the norms of an organization are negative, so things like corruption, covering for bad behavior, etc., this is not a problem that can be solved overnight, right? This is going to be something that's embedded in the workplace culture. It's going to be a behavioral element for everybody who works there. And it's going to take a long time and some seriously good leadership to root that out. So how does organizational change happen if it's needed? First thing you need to do is identify the norms that currently exist in the agency. Are those norms functional? Are they positive? Or are they, dysfunctional? Are they corrupt? Are they outside of the span of what they should be? Right? If they are, you need to eliminate those negative norms, right? And how do you do that? You do that through example. You lead through example. That you don't engage in corruption. You punish those properly who do, and you positively reinforce behavior that does not, right? So you're gonna people who engage by those positive organizational norms are gonna get the promotions. They're going to get the commendations. They're going to get positive feedback. Those who don't adhere to these norms are not going to get promotions. They're going to stagnate. They're going to stay right where they are, right? That this is a message that, hey, we don't like the behavior that we see out of you. So no, you're not getting promoted. You're not being given more responsibility and authority. Good leadership requires a lot of things in order for it to be successful. And the first thing is there's some of those elements are going to be fairness, trust, and respect, right? Subordinates will not strive to meet the goals of a supervisor who they don't respect, who they don't trust, who they don't like, who they know is engaging in impropriety on the job, corruption on the job, right? Nobody likes the rules for me, but not for thee, right? So if how can you expect anybody to ever do good work for a superior if that superior is all over the place doing things he or she should not be, and the subordinates know it. So it's very important that somebody in a position of leadership require that fairness, that trust, and respect. Competency is another big one. Superiors who are completely incompetent, who got that position because of politics or because of nepotism or because of, they go drinking with the guy, who made the decision on the job. They go every Tuesday, they go out to the bar. But they don't know their job. They don't know what they're doing. They're not going to fool anybody. Right. Superiors are going to look at, or excuse me, subordinates are going to look at their superiors who are incompetent and say, this guy or this girl, they don't know what they're doing. Right. We know what we're doing. They don't know what we're doing. And you're going to put us in danger, or you're going to, make us work in a way that's inefficient to the mission's, to the organization's mission. So you can never earn respect as a leader if you are incompetent. And when we have incompetent leaders, what we typically see is the performance of the subordinates gets sloppy. It gets sloppy, or it diminishes. It's important for superiors to get to know their subordinates. You don't have to know every blessed detail about the people who work for you, but you do want to make them feel seen. That do they have young kids at home? Are they married? Are they single? Are they healthy? Do they have chronic health issues? Knowing these things are important just generally about the job, right? It impacts decisions about scheduling, it impacts decisions about job performance and so forth. But you also need to demonstrate that, I'm invested in my subordinates and I care. I'm not just, up here collecting a paycheck. No, I know your name. I know, you've got a kid who, recently had COVID. How's your son doing? That you are invested in your subordinates. Not only, you know, you'll get a better performance out of your subordinates if they know that you literally care, right? And that you literally know them and that you're not just a cog in a machine. Superiors should set goals for professional growth and development of their line staff. These things should be attainable. They should be important. So it shouldn't just be superfluous. It shouldn't just be making goals for the sake of making goals, right? They should actually be relevant to the organization's mission. And they should be attainable. You never want to set goals that literally no one can attain. There is nothing that will undermine motivation and performance more than a goal that everybody knows is impossible, right? So you want to set goals that they can strive for, that they can reach for. Excuse me. And in doing so, you want to make sure that those goals are something that can actually be attained. We want to work on developing a positive image. It's never been more true than right now, in that officers want to project a positive image to the community. Remember, we're at a unique place in history where every human being in the United States, maybe minus 0.01%, walks around with a video camera at all times, right? So once upon a time, and not that long ago, 30 years ago, that was not an issue for police, but now it is a daily issue that both the people you're engaging with and the people who are standing around will film your behavior, and that behavior can become very public very quickly. If you are projecting a positive image, you don't have to worry about that film being released in the internet or submitted to a news agency. If you are not projecting a positive image, then yes, you do have to worry. So keep that in mind. Managers need to project a positive example for how to engage with both the community, both those that break the law and both those that are victims, all sides of the community. Excuse me. And a good rule of thumb here is to be respectful, even to all people. Everybody is Mr. or Miss, or you treat them with respect, even when they're not treating you with respect. It presents you well to the community. Officers, you remember, community attitudes towards police are going to dictate how the community engages with police. So if you've got a community that doesn't trust the police, they don't like the police, they're not going to comply. They're not going to come to you for help. When you go to them for help or information about a crime that's happened, they are not going to oblige you because they don't trust you. And that's going to make your job a lot harder, right? So remember, projecting that positive attitude, treating people fairly, treating people with respect, will build a bridge between you and the community, which will ultimately make your job easier, right? And the goals of the organization will be more easily met when you have a community that works with you versus a community that isolates from you and is not willing to engage with you. Okay, want to focus on some issues here of cultural competency. Remember that the community in the United States is incredibly diverse in terms of race, sex, gender identity, religion, etc. So you want to have some understanding of how different subcultures work. Certainly, just so you understand that there are different groups have different values, different groups communicate in different ways based off of their subcultures. So if you have a wider awareness, you'll be more successful in your policing. One of the things I want to talk about too is racial profiling, which is a topic that has come to light in the past 30 or so years of policing. That's been a hot topic. It's often known as driving while black. This disproportionate number of racial minorities that are getting pulled over by police relative to their white counterparts. This has certainly been not a good look for police. It's been very, very bad PR. And it has most definitely alienated communities. So one of the ways that we hold, police accountable in terms of racial profiling is to conduct audits of their stops and their arrests to make sure that there isn't that disproportionate effect. Well, the only real way to combat the issue of racial profiling is going to be through ethics and integrity. Ethics are just the fair and balanced methods according to the law that no matter what the person's background, you apply the law to them equally across the board as you would anybody else. And integrity, right? Integrity, don't deviate from that ethical code. Even when no one's looking, even when there's no video camera, even when there's no consequence, doing the right thing, whether, anybody else is going to know or not. That's integrity. Let us talk about misconduct and unethical behavior and corruption. Police misconduct is a really wide spectrum of behavior. It can be anything from mistreatment of offenders to illegal search and seizure. It can be violation of constitutional rights. It can be perjury. It can be evidence tampering. Any number of things. Okay, so we don't want police misconduct, obviously. Unethical behavior also occurs, and we want to keep that to the greatest minimum possible. And unethical behavior could be things like taking extra long breaks, taking sick time when you're not sick, coming to work late on a regular basis, etc. That's going to be unethical behavior, and certainly it doesn't make the organization run well when unethical behavior runs rampant. Corruption. Let's define corruption, because corruption is going to go beyond the unethical. This is something that's done for personal gain, and it literally involves the abuse of your authority as an officer for private gain. It is typically greed that drives corruption, right? That you have access to money, that you, based on your authority as an officer, you have access to money you wouldn't otherwise have access to, that there is no legal record of, and therefore, you just take it, right? And that gets back to integrity, that there's no consequence, no one's looking, and nobody will know except the criminals, and who's going to believe the criminals over the cops? So you just take it, right? You just pocket that money and now it's yours. Well, that's corruption, right? Lack of character and greed, like I said, are the things that drive that. Sometimes unhappy workers, people who feel that they're being mistreated in the workplace, will engage in this kind of behavior as justification for their corrupt acts, but it's not okay. We also have the slippery slope with gratuities, right? And gratuities is when local businesses and local individuals provide police with free services, right? And in return, there's a silent quid pro quo. There's a silent expectation that you'll have a greater presence, police presence near my business, keep crime at bay so that my business can thrive. And there's also a silent expectation that if I ever call the police as a business owner, you're going to be here lickety split because I give you all the free coffee you want, or I give you all the free dry cleaning of all of your uniforms, or I give you free meals, right? That is unethical, and it is a very slippery slope. It might start out as a cup of coffee and a donut and not seem like a big deal. right? But the problem here is that not every business is doing well enough to be able to afford to do that, right? They don't have enough money to do that. Should they be receiving less law enforcement coverage because they're not as successful? Of course not, right? You have a legal and an ethical obligation to administer the law across the board, regardless of free meals and free coffee or otherwise. And then there sort of becomes this expectation on your end, on officers' end, people who regularly accept those gratuities. Well, when somebody doesn't offer it, it's kind of like, well, really, why not? Right? You get this sense of entitlement. And well, maybe if you call, I won't be here, or I won't be here for 45 minutes, right? Which is completely inappropriate. So, and it's also that very slippery slope of, I take free coffee, in my first year of being a police officer, and by year 9, I incremental steps, free coffee became a free meal became a free bottle of alcohol at Christmas as a thank you, free bottle of alcohol at Christmas becomes a cash payment, and it becomes out of control. So avoid being above the law. We don't like rules for thee, but not for me. And ultimately, the big question becomes with police corruption is, yes, of course, there's police corruption, but how rampant is police corruption? Is it the bad apple situation, or is the entire barrel rotten? And statistically, what we see is the vast majority of civil lawsuits are brought against 1% of the policing population, which supports the bad apple hypothesis, right? That it is less than 1% of the policing population who are behaving in a way that people are suing them for violations, whether it's use of force violations or constitutional right violations. We do not see this as an across the board problem. However, life is not fair, right? And the media covers that less than 1% in a way that makes it appear that it's a constant, rampant problem. And they also fail to cover the really good stories, right? Because if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead, right? So there's a lot of stories out there of officers providing help, going above and beyond their work requirements, their job duties, doing really positive things, and then media never covers it. Nobody ever hears about it. So it does tend to be the bad apple, not the bad barrel. But in instances where there is corruption, good management can help stave off that corruption, right? Good leadership, educating subordinates about what will be tolerated in the organization and what will not be tolerated in the organization. And training, we get back to training, right? Can you train somebody to be ethical? Can you train somebody to have integrity if they don't? Maybe not, right? But certainly if we are constantly training on it, it becomes an ever-present part of the police culture. And there will always be officers that are ethical and that do have intense integrity. And we get back to that sort of silent peer pressure, that when your peers who follow the law and the letter of the law and who are very ethical and who value their integrity see you misbehaving, there's going to be judgment, and there's going to be some social pushback, and there's going to be some shaming. So maybe you're not the most ethical person in the world, but you don't like the public shaming from your fellow officers, so you stay in line. Right. So training puts it on that radar, it puts it on your radar saying, okay, well, this would be, according to training, this would be an ethical violation, and I don't want negative feedback from my colleagues, right? I don't want them to lose respect for me. So can we train integrity? Maybe, maybe not, but certainly we can incorporate it as a part of the culture in a way that it will become central to performance.